Hi guys, I've got some really cool wines to talk you through today. I've got 3 Californian wines. We've got a 2019 La. This is a Cab Sav. And we've got a 2022 Old Vine Zinfandel by Hartford. And we have a blend, a red blend by Janata. This is the Taurus 2019. 3 fantastic producers, 3 fantastic wines, all from different parts of California. I want to talk you through a little bit about Californian wines and what makes these 3 really interesting. Kicking off, as I said, we've got the 2019 La. This is actually from Napa Valley, but it's Mount Vida. We're up in the mountains. Generally, when we think about Californian wines, we know that that climate is a warmer climate, but this wine has actually been likened to Chateau Latour over in Bordeaux. I'm going to sidetrack for a little bit, but stay with me on this. Chateau Latour is one of the first growths over in Bordeaux. You've probably heard me talk about the 1855 Bordeaux classification, which means that in 1855, they basically said, these are the best wines. Most of them have been in that ranking since 1855. Chateau Latour is one of those. It's a first growth. This wine, even though it's from a warmer climate, has been likened to Chateau Latour, and this vintage specifically, so the 2019. Bordeaux is a maritime climate. We've got that cooling influence of the water off the coast. California is a warmer climate, but we do have multiple different cooling influences depending on where you are. This La is actually from the AVA, American Viticultural area, which is basically different regions in America known for producing wine. Within those different AVAs, some of them have built up a reputation for producing really high quality, elegant styles versus sort of high volume, inexpensive wines. And that sort of logic applies to everywhere, all over the world, when we're thinking of premium versus high volume, inexpensive wines. So when you're looking for a wine, those things are really handy to know. I'm going to talk you through some of these AVAs as well. So Mount Vida, it's in Napa Valley, so that's the broader sort of region. AVA within that is Mount Vida, so up in the mountains. When we step up in elevation, altitude becomes a cooling influence. So even though it's typically a warmer climate, for this wine, the cooling influence becomes altitude. When we're thinking of Napa Valley and a lot of Californian wines, obviously being down the coast, we have cooling influence of the ocean, so cool breezes, but we also have a lot of fog, which also becomes a cooling influence. Generally, what keeps a lot of the wines cool and what has helped Napa Valley develop that reputation for producing high quality wines is the fog kind of spills through the valley. What's really interesting about this wine is these vineyard sites actually sit above the fog line. So we still get that exposure to the sun, which helps to fully ripen the grapes. When we're in a warmer climate or any climate, we essentially want to be able to lengthen the ripening period, ideally, to make higher quality wine. And the reason being is that when we have a cooler influence and a cooler ripening period, we can lengthen that ripening period. It means that acid levels in the grape drop more slowly, sugar levels rise more slowly. We get a nice sort of crisp flavor profile. It's leaner but not less complex. It's just more fresh and crisp and vibrant. That helps to also bring out the vibrancy of the fruit. It also highlights more of the terroir. Whereas when we're in a warmer climate, the acid levels drop really quickly, sugar levels rise really quickly, and we can kind of step over from being a ripe flavor profile into an overripe or cooked flavor profile. Sometimes you get that sort of jamminess. And they can be really enjoyable wines too, but it just means that we don't get as much of that freshness that comes through. This wine being above the fog line means that with the altitude, we can lengthen that ripening period, but we can fully ripen the grape because we have that nice exposure to the sun. This wine has been likened to Chateau Latour. It is very cool, climate reflective. It is a fantastic wine, fantastic producer. Really small production. I think there's about 2,000 cases that are produced each year, really high quality. It's everything that you want in a beautiful Cab Sav. This is yeah, an investment grade wine. You've got that demand, the low supply. It's just a fantastic wine. And being likened to Chateau Latour, the 2019, this one specifically was likened to Chateau Latour. That says it all. That's one of the best wines in the world. And this being likened to it shows the character of this wine, that premium, high quality. They also have wine cab sauv from multiple different mountain AVAs. So if you're really interested in how the terroir influences the wine itself, it's really interesting to actually see the comparison between the different mountains. So still above the fog line, still at higher altitude, but then you're getting that reflection of terroir. So the entire environment, the soil, the aspect. So all of those things influence that final wine and how that will taste, but also various different decisions that winemakers make. Fantastic wine. So I'll bring a map up on the screen. We're going to Sonoma County, which is also on the coastline, Russian River Valley, for an old vine, Zinfandel. So a lot of people have mixed views on Zinfandels, and it could well be that you may not have had a good one, to put it simply. And the reason being is when we have a Zinfandel, or any wine, but particularly a Zinfandel, when we have one that's from a high volume, inexpensive area, basically what happens with that sort of approach to winemaking is you generally don't have as much of a cooling influence, and you also generally machine harvest. So you'll pull all of the different grapes. It's to speed up the production process, whereas when you have a high quality premium wine, you usually hand pick. So if there's any grapes that are, say, underripe, overripe, you can just hand pick the best ones. And of course, then when you go through the winemaking process, that then reflects in the final bottle. Why that is so important when it comes to Zinfandels and knowing how to pick a good one and a not so good one is Zinfandel as a grape variety actually ripens unevenly. So if you are buying a Zinfandel that is from an AVA that's known for producing high volume, inexpensive Zinfandels, it basically means that you're probably going to get a more unbalanced wine because you're going to have ripe fruit, unripe fruit, overripe fruit, all in the same wine. So it tends to be a little bit unbalanced. The benefit of an AVA that has a good reputation is, and particularly a producer, is we're going to get that greater grape selection. So we're usually hand picking. We can then choose which are the best grapes. That makes so much sense when we're thinking about Zinfandel particularly, which ripens unevenly. The other benefit is you've got an old vine Zinfandel. So we know that old vines essentially produce less grapes, but they pump all of their resources into a fewer number of grapes, which means that they have a greater flavor concentration. Old vines are more ingrained into the soil. So when they're pulling up those resources, it's pulling up the minerals, and we get all of that come through into building out that flavor profile of the grape itself. And that flavor concentration is just deeper and denser, and we get just such a great expression of terroir. And with a Zinfandel, I had this at a tasting and it was just such a beautiful wine. You can really tell it's old vine. It's got that spice. It's still got that fruit forwardness, like the raspberry. It just comes through. It's really nice. Russian River Valley, you've got fog that is a cooling influence off the coast. So Sonoma County, great producer. Those old vines, just that flavor concentration makes it more powerful, more dense. Still cool climate, reflective, but you get a little bit more, I wouldn't say jamminess, but you do get a little bit more of a warmer climate vibe in this one. So still cool climate, but you have almost like a raspberry pie type flavor with a beautiful level of spice, but you still get that acidity that's retained that helps to drive that fruit forward. And it's got that complexity and that depth that you would want from an old vine, or that you would know when you have an old vine wine. That really comes through. Such a fantastic wine. The other place that's really good for old vine Zinfandel is an AVA called Lottie. I'll bring up a map, but if we've got the Napa Valley, Sonoma County, we're going further inland. And usually, so Lottie is actually within the Central Valley, and usually that area is known for producing those high volume, inexpensive wines because it's hotter inland. So we don't have the cooling influence or so much of that cooling influence that extends inland, except for Lottie. So Lottie is still inland, but it's actually close to, the name escapes me, but it's a river. And so it does have that cooling influence of the water. So the cool breezes that then help to lengthen that ripening period so it's not as hot. And that's why old vine Zinfandels from there can be fantastic in terms of that sort of nice freshness that still comes through from the higher acidity, but also that really nice sort of density that comes with that old vine fruit flavor profile and a hint of a little bit more warmth. Like as I said in this one, there's like a raspberry sort of pie vibe, but still that freshness that you get with a cool climate wine. So yeah, it's really handy to know the different AVAs. So Russian River Valley is known for old vine Zinfandel, high quality old vine Zinfandel, and so is Lottie, even though it's in a broader region, Central Valley, that is known for high volume, inexpensive wines. Last but not least, so this is the 2019 Toros by Janata. So this is going further south. But before I sort of talk you through this AVA, Janata is actually the sister estate to Screaming Eagle. If you know your Californian wines, and particularly if you know your investment grade wines, you will absolutely know Screaming Eagle. Really low production, really high demand, absolute quality. It's one of the best wines and best producers in America, if not the world. And yeah, this is their sister estate, much more approachable. Instead of, thousands of dollars for a bottle, this one I think is 125. So you're still getting that quality of production from the same producers essentially. And this one is further south. So we're going down closer to Los Angeles. So we're down in Santa Barbara. This one also has a cooling influence off the coast. So I'm probably not going to pronounce this correctly, but it's from Santa Ynez Valley. So in the Santa Barbara County, it has that cooling influence off the coast, which means that even though it's a little bit warmer, it still can produce really high quality sort of Bordeaux blend type varieties and Syrah as well. So this is actually a blend of 10 different varieties that Janata actually produce. Toros translates to everyone, but it's basically bringing together everything that they produce into a fantastic wine. A little bit warmer, we're still getting those really nice flavor profile of the cooling influence, that freshness that comes through. We've got all of those beautiful flavors. If you like your Cab Sauv, if you like your Bordeaux blends, you're going to love this. It's blueberry, blackberry, you've got licorice, so that nice spice that comes through. Just such a fantastic wine and a much more approachable price if you're looking for a high quality producer. I've talked you through 3 different producers, 3 different wines, 3 different AVAs. AVAs definitely, I'll bring up a map so you can become more familiar with them. Each of them have a different reputation for producing, whether it's high volume, inexpensive wines or high quality. Different AVAs as well, depending on where they are and what their cooling influence is. As I said, we've got the cool breezes off the coast, we've got fog, we've got altitude. All of those things are the cooling influence that we have with American AVAs. The cooling influences will also help you determine what styles of wine. So if you have a cooling influence off the coast, different AVAs, depending on how close they are to the coast, for example, and how much of that cooling influence that they get, will actually tell you the style of wines. For example, if we have more of a cooling influence off the coast, we generally would look for AVAs or have AVAs that produce really elegant styles of Pinot Noir, for example. So early ripening variety that likes a cooler climate versus say like a Cab Sauv, which is generally a later ripening variety, which can ripen in cooler climates if it has that longer ripening period and the influence of the sun, which we have with Likoya, versus like a hotter climate where it just pushes into that sort of jamminess, those cooked fruits, and essentially a shorter ripening period when it's hotter. So all of those things help you to understand the variety, the style of that wine, whether it's elegant, whether it's kind of high volume and inexpensive. So hopefully that helps. 3 fantastic wines. I will stop rambling there. Cheers.